Hi class, so I decided to make this video because we didn't get a chance to meet and start reading it together. And as I've read this first chapter, I realized how much I really like the book. And I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I guess I really think that his ideas have a lot of merit. So that's kind of what this discussion will be about. I'm going to share my thoughts, some golden lines, and I'm going to ask you to do the same. You can respond to me directly, just kind of whatever you want. And later on, I will be finding sources that kind of disagree with Gladwell, because I think that's only fair. I wouldn't expect all of you to agree, but I'm not saying that I agree with them 100%, but I'm trying to think of some examples that I've seen in my life, and yeah, it seems like there's a lot of truth to it. So I guess we'll start out with this whole idea of the Matthew effect. And the question that I had for me, that kind of, while I was reading, was to what extent, if any, does this idea hold true today? And a couple of sayings, I don't know if they're sayings or phrases that kind of came to mind were it's not what you know, it's who you know, and you got to have money to make money. So why don't you think about those two for a minute, and can you think of any examples, either locally, like maybe people that you know, that this would hold true, or maybe some examples that you read about? That first one, for some reason I thought of the NFL, and how the owners they are like a very tight-knit group. Some consider them like the good old boys group, right? It's a really tight circle, and it's really hard to kind of get in there and to purchase a team. In fact, Donald Trump tried, I think, in the 90s, and he got rejected. Maybe you heard of somebody that landed a job. You thought, man, how did he or she get that? And you find out that, well, they knew somebody on the inside. And I think this holds true a lot. First job I ever got was at a small store in Lodi, Star Market, and I got the job because my dad was a salesman for a beverage company. And the manager of this particular store hired me because he liked my dad. When I got the job digging ditches for the plumbing company, it was because my mom's cousin had a plumbing business. And when I left the plumbing business to go back to the beverage company and work in the warehouse, drive a forklift, drive a Dr. Pepper truck around town, it was because my dad was the branch manager at the time. So, it doesn't really mean much. These are kind of small-scale things, but still, I feel like in my life there are many examples that would make this phrase hold true. And that second one, I don't really have a lot of experience with that, but I do recall sitting at a blackjack table once and listening to somebody next to me says, you gotta bet a lot to win a lot. So but I didn't make a lot of money, so I would be all upset after I lost a $5 hand, and this guy was betting like a couple hundred. And so anyway, just kind of like to start with that, and maybe this could be something that you respond to on the post. Okay, so now I'd like to share a few of my golden lines, and the first one is on page 19, and I shared it in my chunking, but it's basically the second paragraph where Gladwell tells us, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I hope to convince you of by the time you are finished with this book. And it's basically his thesis statement. So I thought I'd read it, maybe stop and kind of think aloud as well. So he writes, in Outliers, I want to convince you that these kinds of personal explanations of success don't work. People don't rise from nothing. We do owe something to parentage and patronage. The people who stand before kings may look like they did it all by themselves, but in fact, they are invariably the beneficiaries of hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies that allow them to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in ways others cannot. And I think that's a key point, and he's really going to touch on that in the second part of the book. It makes a difference where and when we grew up. And I'm going to stop right there for a minute, right? Because I know some of you, I've heard from some of you where you don't really agree with this, but I was thinking about the 90s, the .com, right? There was the time was right for those people, right? And you had to hit it just right, because if you got in too late, you didn't make the money. And I mean, there are tons of period, I don't know, what do they call it? Pyramid schemes, right? You got to time those things just right. Let's see. It makes a difference where and when we grew up. The culture we belong to and the legacies passed down by our forebears shape the patterns of our achievement in ways we cannot begin to imagine. It's not enough to ask what successful people are like, in other words. It is only by asking where they are from that we can unravel the logic behind who succeeds and who doesn't. All right, so yeah, I pretty much explained that. I just think he really says, in that paragraph, basically what he wants to accomplish. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to section 5. I could talk a lot about the education part. Well, you know what? I think I am. I don't have a golden line, but I was talking about this to my wife, and, I was kind of stuck on the notion that so many kids kind of slip through the cracks because maybe they have a bad day, or they're a poor test taker, or they're just not ready yet. My wife teaches 3rd grade, and that's the grade that they give that test to decide who's in GATE. And she kind of gave her perspective, and I thought it was kind of interesting. She said there's a lot of criticism with the GATE programs because it takes away, those kids who are quote unquote smarter, right? It takes those kids away from the quote unquote normal kids, so they don't have an opportunity to kind of learn from their peers. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But anyway, in section 5, the second paragraph there on page 30. Well, actually the first 2 paragraphs. You're right. Think for a moment about what the story of hockey and early birthdays says about success. It tells us that our notion that it is the best and the brightest who, without effort, rise to the top is much too simplistic. Yes, the hockey players who make it to the professional level are more talented than you or me, but they also got a big head start, an opportunity that they neither deserved nor earned, just by random chance. And that opportunity played a critical role in their success. And then he talks about the Matthew effect. And I'm going to read this other quote right after that. So a little bit towards the final paragraph, about halfway down. It is those who are successful, in other words, who are most likely to be given the kinds of special opportunities that lead to further success. It is the rich who get the biggest tax breaks. It is the best students who get the best teaching and most attention. And it is the biggest 9 and 10-year-olds who get the most coaching and practice. Success is the result of what sociologists like to call accumulative. advantage. The professional hockey player starts out a little bit better than his peers, and that little difference leads to an opportunity to make that difference a bit bigger, and that edge in turn leads to another opportunity, to another, and to another. So it's kind of like a snowball effect. But I want to break that down, right? So that first part about the rich who get the biggest tax break, right? I've heard my own accountant say this is true, and I did a quick fact check, right? And it seems that there are a lot of truths to that, right? And this is something that I might share later. And then he talks about it's the best students who get the best teaching. Yeah, right? Because those who teach that, or those who teach it in the GATE program, those who teach in the GATE cluster at the regular schools, they get to go through all of this, they do kind of teaching, training, and things like that, but they want to, right? I think that's important too. And just a random thought that came into my head. I mean, think about a professional, any kind of professional athlete, rock star, movie star. Whenever they go out, they don't have to pay for anything, right? They always get comp stuff, this and that. So, that whole idea of the rich get richer kind of holds true a little bit. So I'll just kind of finish up. I want to go back to the hockey. And I think it's very important that Gladwell, right, makes it known that Canadian hockey, that league, right, it's a self-proclaimed meritocracy, right? And basically what that means is the hockey players advance, right? They succeed on their individual merit, right? So there's no father, right, with deep pockets who could pay his way, right, his son or daughter's way into this league. It doesn't matter. Right? But as we've seen, right, with this whole idea of relative age, that these players, right, even just the slightest advantage, right, they were kind of picked, right, chosen, right, early on, and they got to reap the benefits. They had all the extra practice time. Because I really like the fact that he brought up a basketball. If you get cut from the basketball team, I mean, I'm just thinking where I live right now, I can think of 5, 6, 7 basketball courts. I don't know where the nearest ice hockey rink is, right? So I think the accessibility plays a big part. But I also did a little bit of research, and I'll post this. This idea of a relative age has been studied for a while, and it's true. There's a lot of truth to it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and end it on page 32, because I think this is another reason why I really like this book, and I'll explain after I read it. So, second paragraph, bottom of 32. Gladwell writes, "Do you see the consequences of the way we have chosen to think about success? Because we so profoundly personalize success, we miss opportunities to lift others onto the top rung. We make rules that frustrate achievement. We prematurely write off people as failures. We are too much in awe of those who succeed and far too dismissive of those who fail. And, most of all, we become much too passive. We overlook just how large a role we all play, and by we, I mean society, in determining who makes it and who doesn't." So that's a pretty bold proposition there. So I think one of the purposes of writing this book for Gladwell is he truly believes that if we changed, the way we think, and then in turn changed some of the policies that we have, and I'm not talking about politics, just something as random as making a cutoff date, right, January 1st. Why couldn't we have more? But anyway, he truly believes that we could create more, right? We could create more successful people. So anyway, I look forward to your thoughts, and thanks for listening.